Alright, let's check out the Fire School spells and test. Alright, the fire spells from Spring Test Realm that have been adjusted and updated are as follows: Firecat, Fire Elf, Sunbird, Immolate, Brimstone Revenant, which he doesn't have, Hephaestus, which he also doesn't have, Phoenix, and Helephant. So for Firecat, it does 80 damage to 120 damage. The upper tier goes up in accuracy as you level it up, and it goes up in damage as you level it up, and it only costs 1 pip. For all of these, I only upgraded it to tier 2 because almost all of them are exactly the same, just an increase on the lower level. So he's a poor whiz, I saved his cash. On the lower path, Firecat costs 2 pips and it stays at 75% accuracy. It still does 80 to 120 damage, but this time it detonates a damage over time. Tier 3 does a little bit more damage and detonates a damage over time. Tier 4, a little bit more damage and detonate over time. 1 over time, mind you, 1 over time. And Tier 5 does even more damage and detonates 1 over time. Fire Elf currently does 100 damage and then 210 over 3 rounds. For the upper path, it still costs 2 pips, and the accuracy actually stays the same at 75%, but the damage gets moved around a little bit. So Tier 2 has a little bit more initial damage and a little bit less on the overtime. Same thing with Tier 3, a little bit more on the initial damage and a little bit less on the overtime. Same thing with 4, same thing with Tier 5. On the lower path, however, it does 95 initial damage, 135 overtime, and this puts an afterlife on the target. And if they're defeated, that does a 30 damage over time to all enemies. So I'm guessing that's 10 each round. For Tier 3, the damage goes up a little bit for the initial, the overtime stays the same, the potential damage over time to all enemies stays the same. Tier 4, the initial damage goes up a little bit, and the overtime stays the same, the afterlife stays the same. Tier 5, the initial damage goes up, overtime stays the same, and the afterlife potential damage stays the same. Sunbird! Sunbird in-game does 295 to 355 damage. It costs 3 pips. The upper path stays at 3 pips. The accuracy goes up as you level it up, and the damage goes up as you level it up. On the lower path, the damage goes down to 190 to 230, and it extends an overtime, I'm guessing by 1 round. It doesn't say, so I'm just guessing it's 1 round. Tier 3 does a tiny bit more damage and extends the damage over time. Tier 4 gets a little bit more of an upgrade in damage and extends an overtime. And Tier 5 gets a small upgrade in damage and extends it over time. Immolate. This one gives 200 damage to the caster and 600 damage to the target. It's interesting that for the upper path, they changed the icons on it and left the original one the same. I guess just instead of saying take and deal, they just put the picture there. So the upper path stays at 4 pips, but the accuracy increases as you level it up. And let's see, the damage to the caster stays the same at 200, but the damage to the target goes up a little bit each time. Not too bad, up by 15 each one. For the lower path, the damage that the caster takes goes down to 150, and the damage that the target takes goes down to 450, but this also puts a 90 heal over time on the caster. Tier 3, the damage that the caster takes stays the same. The damage that the target gets goes up just a little bit, and the heal over time actually gets a big boost of 30, so it's like 10 more per round. Tier 4, you take the same amount of damage, and the target gets a little bit more damage to it, and the heal over time goes up by 40 this time, but it's also 4 rounds. So technically it didn't get a numerical increase, it just got a tick added to the clock. Because this one is 30, 3 rounds. This one is 40 each round for 3 rounds. Now this one is 40, 4 times 40 is 160, for 4 rounds. And Tier 5, the damage you take stays at 150, the damage they take goes up to 480, and then now it's 5 rounds of healing at 40 per round. So that's pretty nice. Now the lower path doesn't have any requirements on it, so I wonder if you can boost up this heal over time. Phoenix does 515 to 595 flat damage. The upper path costs 5 pips, and it starts out at 75% accuracy, and then once you get to Tier 3, it stays at 80 for Tier 3 and Tier 4. Tier 5 is 85 accuracy, and it goes up in damage as you level it up. The lower path, however, the damage goes to a flat 500, and then it can do 185 more damage per overtime on the target, max of 1. It doesn't say it's fire damage, so I mean, we can assume it's fire damage, but I guess if they had a different sort of trap on it, I wonder if you use like an elemental trap, if this would use a different one. I'll have to test that out. Tier 3, more damage to them. The potential damage stays the same, a max of 1 overtime being used. Tier 4, the damage goes up a little bit. The potential damage stays the same, per overtime, a max of 1. At Tier 5, however, the damage to them stays the same, the potential damage stays the same, but this time it's a max of 2 overtimes that qualify for that. So this would be a max of 370, without any boosts, of course. And finally, Helephant does 625 to 705 flat damage, 6 pips. The upper path stays at 6 pips, and the accuracy goes up as you level it up, and so does the damage. The lower path, however, the damage goes down to a flat 610, and then does 225 damage over time, probably 3 rounds, if the target has a shield. Tier 3 does more initial damage and more overtime damage if they have a shield. Tier 4, more initial damage, more overtime damage if they have a shield, and same thing for Tier 5, more initial damage, more potential damage if the target has a shield. Now my fire doesn't have a Brimstone Revenant, but another one of my wizards do, so I'll just let you know what this one does. Brimstone Revenant is a lore spell. It does 470 damage and then adds a 25% blade to your next fire spell. Tier 2, the damage goes up, the blade stays the same. Tier 3, increase of damage, blade stays the same. Tier 4, increase of damage, blade stays the same. And Tier 5, the damage stays the same and the blade goes up to 30%. And finally, Hephaestus. None of my wizards have this, so thank you to Atmoplex for posting the image of the Spellement path. Hephaestus is a lore spell, but it's not one that used to be dropped by the lore master. This is one you can craft from treasure cards. I believe the Grady sells the recipe over in Avalon. I don't know if that's going to change or not. I asked the question on Twitter and there was no answer to it yet. So anyhow, Hephaestus costs 5 pips, 70% accuracy, it does 340 to 420 damage, and gives a 25% global. Yes. Tier 2 does more damage, same global. Tier 3, even more damage, same global. Tier 4, even more damage, same global. And Tier 5, even more damage, same global. Alright, that's the 8 spells that Fire got upgraded. Let's go test these out. Alright, let's try out this Fire Elf. This one is 2 pips. It does damage and damage over time and puts an afterlife on the target. I'm not going to boost it up because I don't want to kill these guys too fast. Okay, there's the afterlife, and now it does the damage and puts the... oh boy. Alright, Immolate. I take 150 damage and 450 damage to them, and I get a heal over time. Alright, damage to me. Damage to them. Ooh. Ow. And then 90 heal over time for me. Nice. Well, it's still got the afterlife on it, so that doesn't go away just because the OT is done. Ooh, Firecat. Let's use a Firecat on it and detonate it. Alright, pretty Firecat. Okay, that damage, and boom, there went the OT. It's dead. Now, there we go with the afterlife. Cool. So boosting up the Phoenix with Gargantuan, that's his highest sun enchant spell, 225. Now it does 725 and 180 per overtime. Yes, he's not dead. Let's see what type of damage we can do. Such overkill. I bet it has like 2 health. 2500! Alright, I'm going to use this little Ember Elf over here. It's not going to do much damage to it on purpose because I want to extend the damage over time. Alright, so now this will be the first round for that. Unfortunately, you can't see how many rounds are still on it. It says no effects, but whatever. Okay, this shouldn't kill. I'm not going to boost it up. So, Sunbird does damage and extends damage over time. It doesn't say fire over time, it just says damage over time. Okay, that was only 1, so there should be 2 more rounds left. Oh, that would be really bad for like Deer Knight, Reindeer Knight, the Spinosaur. The Sunbird here it's pretty good stuff. Ooh, and 1 more round. Nice. Nice, that's cool. I don't think I've ever seen these guys use shields, honestly. Wouldn't have mattered, sir. Okay, let's see what type of upgrade of damage the Gargantuan does for Immolate. Ooh, but the damage that I did to myself actually went up with this. That's interesting. On the previous spell where it gives me something and I hit them, it doesn't. Ooh, 142 over 3 rounds. Interesting. Now why? Now see, that's weird. Why would it do that? It did, it was a heal over time, right? But instead of doing a small amount, it did like 100 something on the first round, and then like 90 something on the second round, and then nothing on the third round. I'm very confused about that. Ooh, yeah. Oh, it did go up the afterlife. That's neat. Crit. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so the Phoenix, does it also increase the per overtime? No, it does not. It only increases the initial damage. But I think that we'll go for this one. Haha, don't kill me, please. Ah, poo. Ouch. Ooh. That was pretty sweet. Oh, those dolphin sounds. Okay, so this one does 610 and 225 OT if they have a shield. And now it just upgrades the initial damage. Alright, well, after a half an hour of running around the entire spiral trying to find mobs that would shield, I should have just not been lazy and got on my other wizard to test it out, but Helephant just does a lot more damage, so you can imagine what that looks like. Thanks so much for checking out this video on checking out the brand new fire spell upgrades, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!